Welcome to Saturday versus Sunday, where we talk college and NFL. And today we're going to talk about the Bills-Dolphins game that just ended. And I mean, this was a gritty performance by the Dolphins. They looked like they were dead in the water after the first two games of this season. They just did not go well. It was looking ugly. And then they came out here really competitive with the Bills, and they were going toe to toe with the Bills. It looked like an even game for most of the game. Both offenses had stretches where they looked really good. Both defenses could force three and outs on multiple occasions. Like, this looked like two teams that were at the same level. And one of these teams made two critical errors that ended up giving the game away, and the other team didn't. And that's kind of the overall story of this game. Like, obviously, if you watch this, you know the two mistakes. It was the roughing the kicker penalty that kept a drive alive for the Bills, and then they went up by a score. And then with 3 minutes left in the game, as the Dolphins were driving, Tua makes the back-breaking error of throwing the interception that ends up sealing the game. And now this is 2 weeks in a row the opposing team has done something to keep the Bills momentum going, or keep the Bills in the game. At least last week, the Derrick Henry fumble kept the Bills in the game, and the Bills walked through the door and took the game from them. In this one, the Dolphins were actually building some momentum at the time of the roughing the kicker penalty. So they were on a stretch of defensive series there where they were really holding the Bills offense in check. At that point of the game, the Bills offense kind of went cold and the Dolphins were getting stops. And this was another moment where the Dolphins were forcing the Bills on I think that might have even been a 3-and-out, and they were getting another stop here. And instead, they make the critical error of roughing the kicker and hand the Bills another opportunity. And the Bills walked right through that door, scored a touchdown. And then, as you all saw, Tua threw the game away with that brutal interception. Now, on that specific play, the motion Achane was on, like he was motioning to the right and releasing downfield. That motion brought the linebacker right into that lane where he ended up throwing the pass. So that actually seemed like an odd way to motion the running back if it was going to pull the defender right into that window anyways. It just looked like neither player on that play, Waddle or Achane, were really going to be open with the way the defense was configured, at least on that specific play. It just looked like the spacing of it was like a mess on that side of the field. And it seems like no matter who he tried to throw it to, that wasn't going to work. And he clearly had no clue the linebacker was there. So that was brutal. And now that's got to be heartbreaking for a Dolphin fan, because the team finally looked like it had its feet under itself. The receiver Waddle looked good. Hill finally looked good. Like, this team, like both Ollie Gordon, that rookie, looked pretty good. Like, there was a lot of things the Dolphins were doing that looked pretty good in this game. And that at least would give a Dolphins fan some kind of hope. But then he just makes the critical error. So I'm starting to wonder if a Dolphins fan could still get behind this guy. Like Tua, he's just not it. Like, this, how many more mistakes does he have to make to realize he's just not it? And even though you pay him like a number one top 10 quarterback, this is not top 10 quarterback type performance. But on the other side of the field, Josh Allen is a top 10 quarterback. He's actually a top 2 type quarterback. He's obviously the current MVP. And he went 22 for 28, 213 yards, 3 TDs, no picks. And I mean, that's the Bills have not made the critical mistake. They're playing clean football. And yeah, the offense kind of sputtered at times. You'd say this wasn't their best game, but it was good enough. And they didn't make any mistakes, and they were front running the game the whole time anyways. And to be fair, even if Tua doesn't throw that interception and they tie the game, that doesn't mean they're going to win the game. It's just making it a lot more sweaty for the Bills. So from the Bills' perspective, I'm sure they're happy the way that ended. It didn't want it to have to go to what it looked like whoever had the ball last might win, sort of thing. So I'm sure a Bills fan can admit that wasn't the greatest game. And they obviously didn't expect the Dolphins to put up that much of a fight, but good for the Dolphins for showing up. But I wonder if this loss hurts even worse than the blowout to the Colts at the beginning of the season, because you could almost chalk that one up to, oh, something just wasn't right. They just weren't ready that day. So that's not a true statement of the quality of the team. That's a moment in time type game where that's just not probably a repeatable performance. And then here they come out looking really good, going toe to toe with the best team, one of the best teams in the NFL. And then the Dolphins clearly are the inferior team when it comes to protecting the ball and not making the critical error. And when you make a mistake to a team like Buffalo, you're just not going to win. They're too good. They're too good, even on a night where they're not playing their best, to make any kind of mistake. And they, you opened the door for them to seal the game, and then they walked through the door and sealed the game. And especially now that Buffalo has a legitimate running game too, this is an even more difficult team to play, and it just makes protecting the ball and not making critical errors even more important with a balanced team, whereas in the past, the Bills didn't necessarily have a truly balanced offense. Now it's like a truly balanced offense. Like, it's the quintessential everybody eats offense on receiving, and then James Cook went for 108 yards and a touchdown on the ground. So this is not a team you can make a mistake and expect to win the game. And we've seen that two weeks in a row now. The other team has made a critical mistake. Now, in the Ravens case, the mistake was what gave them the last bit of life to really finish that game. And here, it just made the end of the game a little bit less sweaty. Let's say it that way. And in this division, I mean, I don't know where the Dolphins are going now. That's 2 division losses, so it's not likely the Dolphins can even make the playoffs at this point, even with a wild card. And obviously the Bills are now they're front running the division for sure, and I don't think anyone's surprised about that. I think everyone kind of expects them to win this division, and everything's going as expected so far. But this, I mean, that if that's the best the Dolphins can play, and they still make the error, and that did look like a really good performance. So I know I'm talking a lot about the Dolphins here, and we know. I mean, Allen was super efficient, 3 touchdowns. It's sometimes the Bills aren't going to look like the complete dominant powerhouse that they can be, but they still win the game. Like last week, I don't even think Allen accounted for a touchdown, and they still won 30-10. So the other thing here is the Bills are showing you they can win different ways. They could come from behind, they can front run. They don't necessarily need Allen to account for all the touchdowns. So there's different ways this team can win. And on the other hand, the Dolphins are finding all kinds of creative ways to lose. So, I mean, I don't know. There's much more I have to say here about this one. Both teams were missing key players. Like Ed Oliver was out, and Matt Milano, you never get a full season out of him. And like the broadcast was saying, this Dolphins offensive line is a patchwork of new players and different pieces that are just learning to play together. And interestingly, no sacks. The Bills didn't sack Tua once this game. Tua was doing a good job of keeping himself upright, and they managed to get that. But the Dolphins managed to get to Allen twice. So and Phillips, if he can stay healthy, Jalen Phillips, he's legit. Like, he's a really good player. And like they were saying, both their edge rushers are good. So it's like there's pieces on the Dolphins, and we know that this team can be a top level offense when Hill and Waddle and everything's going. Like, just a couple years ago, I think they led the league in an offense. But clearly there's something wrong, and clearly Tua has not, I don't know, evolved or taken the next steps you would hope him to take. These 3 games are not a good sample for a guy who's this far into his career now with weapons like Hill and Waddle and Achane, and he's still making these type of mistakes. And again, for most of that game, he looked good. But it doesn't matter if you look good for most of the game and you make that mistake at that point of the game. That basically undoes everything you did. And it almost seals this entire season. I don't know exactly what the statistics are, but when you start off 0-3, I think it's super low probability, very, very low probability you could possibly make the playoffs at this point. So good for the Bills. Bit of, I don't really want to call it an ugly one, but I think a Bills fan can say that's not their best game. And and inexplicably, their offense just disappears for stretches of games where it gets forced 3 and out like multiple times where it looks like a world-beating offense, and then it goes 3 and out, 3 and out, and then 3 and out again. And you're thinking to yourself, well, how does that happen after they just march down the field? But I guess that's just the ebbs and flow of football. We also have to give some credit to the Dolphins defense for showing up. So I don't know. That's a shitty one for Dolphins fans because they were in that game. They brought all the effort and all the intensity, and they still lost. And you can, there's nowhere else to point the finger. You guys screwed it up with the critical error of the roughing the kicker, and then the brutal interception that killed any hope of you mounting any kind of comeback. And on the Bills side, this team wins all different ways, and even when you don't bring your A game, you still win the game. And again, if you make a mistake against the Bills, they're going to make you pay. So, I mean, that's what good teams do. Good teams capitalize when you give them when you give them an opportunity and you make a mistake. You just can't do that against a team this good and against a player like Josh Allen. So that's kind of all I got here. Let me know what you think in the comments. Did I miss any critical points in the game? I think I kind of touched on it was obvious. The two big ones that's kind of the two big mistakes seem like the entire game just pivoted on those. Also, if you're still here watching the channel, I appreciate if you could subscribe and maybe give it a like. I know our channel's super small. We just started it last year. So we're trying to grow the channel, and any support you could provide, even just by giving a subscriber a like, we'd super appreciate it. All right, and that's your Saturday versus Sunday podcast.